So anyway, you stayed around the village for...
Yeah, and then by about 1966, I decided to. Well, we moved up here for the summer, and then by '67, I was in Woodstock.
Oh, you got here a long
Yeah, yeah. So that was. I mean, I was still going in periodically, and that's when I started working on Sing Out. So I was kind of commuting a little bit, but. The first year I was here, I was both teaching in New York and also editing Sing Out for about 3 years. But I did a lot of it from up here.
The folk music boom had kind of been sort of segued into rock and roll. And
yeah, and, well, it was a whole different thing. You know, there were people like Joni Mitchell and incredible string band, and you know, there were all kinds of diverse musicians and groups.
Backing up a little bit, we read some of the old Little Sandy reviews, which were like the keepers of the gate against inauthenticity, or how real to the people involved in the scene were these debates about whether or not the song was properly within the folk music genre, or was done with sufficient authenticity, or Paxton, just to tell us a funny story, he didn't name the musician, though I have my guesses, but he wouldn't tell, about somebody referring to somebody else and saying, oh, he's so authentic, he's got circus music in his voice. But I'm wondering how real that was to the people who were on the scene, or if it was just the province of editors, people who had a film magazine.
I think it was. With some people, it was boringly real. I mean, it was really. Unfortunately, there was a lot of debate that went on, but I think the debate did go on a lot more in the pages of magazines than among musicians. I remember the Little Sandy Review as being extremely judgmental and critical of every. You know, they really had their standards, and I also remember Sing Out being very judgmental in a lot of ways. But they were more. A lot of times it was judgmental in a political sense. But I do remember some vicious attacks on Dylan in Sing Out. And, you know, there was a lot of that sectarian stuff. It was really stupid. But there was a lot of it going on, and it was kind of demeaning to the whole thing, I think. But unfortunately, what happened, I think, was a lot of people, whether they were the critics in the newspaper or magazines, or the people that were talking about it, and that was all, I think you found a lot of people were hanging around the folk music scene, and this may have been true of jazz scenes and classical scenes or whatever, but in the folk scene there were a lot of people that couldn't do much else, and so they became sort of self-styled critics, and they would be the, you know, as you say, the keeper of orthodoxy or something, you know, and that kind of relatively, it was boring and it was undemocratic, you know.
Did it influence what people put on record?
Yeah, sure it did.
Yeah.
And at one point, I think earlier on it was much worse. Later on, when when Dylan started taking so much liberties with traditional songs, people started looking at it a little bit differently. The other thing was that I think in the 50s, an awful lot of people said if Pete Seeger sings it, it's folk music. And if he doesn't sing it, it's not. You know, like as if he was the last word on what folk music was. And I think that was another sort of real blind spot that people had. And I was one of those people that for a while, you know, I would say, well, could this be a folk song? Well, Pete Seeger does it, so it's probably okay. You know.
Well, that's a nice black and white line.
Yeah.
A tricky subject.
Right.
What about the concept of this commercialism too? Just when you're talking about, I mean, because that's, you know, Harold Leventhal was all about, you know, how he was in the Leaders, the first one, and criticized for being commercial, and how he thought that was so ridiculous because if you reach more people, you're still singing the same songs, and how is that?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of stuff about being commercial, and that was why when I said on the New World Singers we were so opposed to adding an electric guitar or an electric bass because we felt it was so-called commercial and not purist or something. Yeah. And I think that was really something that people thought a lot about. And Harold Leventhal, I mean, the other thing is, a lot of the commercial groups were pretty bad musically, or very boring and bland. So, you know, you got the things that were commercial were very often the things that we didn't want to listen to not because they were commercial, but because they were just boring. I mean, you listen to the Brothers Four, you know, the New Christy Minstrels or something, you know, it was really horrible music.
Right.
And then if you really got into traditional music and really loved people like Roscoe Holcomb or Doc Watson or Buell Kazee or those people, then you especially thought that these bland sort of white bread groups just didn't really make it.
Anyone stand out in your mind from among active performers of, say, your generation who are the strongest proponents of tradition or non-commercialism or?
Well, of course, Mike Seeger always stands out. I mean, he still is.
Right.
You know, he's. Actually, all those guys in the Ramblers. When Tom Paley was in the Ramblers, he was very. But then there were the people who were into the black scene, the blues guys, who were, you know, I'm trying to think of who was. And not Ben Ronkers, he really took it and made his own thing out of it. But there were people that were playing black music and it had to be note for note exactly as Skip James played it or Blind Lemon or somebody. I think who those people are now. I have to refresh my memory by looking back in the magazines.
Did you encounter a lot of the folks that were discovered and brought up to the village or the festivals to play, such as Doc Watson or John Hurt? Or, I'm wondering, did you ever see any of these guys any complete culture shock as to what they were doing on 3rd Street? And
Oh, yeah.
Playing before, any recollections in that regard? But,
Yeah, I think there was a lot of, especially among some of these black guys, I think it was real confusion. Like, how do they deal with all these? You know, how does a middle-aged black guy who grew up in Jim Crow South and lived all his life in a very insular black community deal with all these young white girls, you know, in their leotards and, you know, hippie sandals and long hair, you know, coming onto them all over the place. You know, it was, you know, it was a lot of that cultural stuff that was very strange. I remember talking to Clarence White when the Kentucky Colonels first came and played the Gaslight, and he was blown away by being in the middle of New York, you know, or, you know, I mean, I was mostly close to people like Brownie McGee, and who was an urban guy. He lived in New York, and he was, yeah, that's right. And, you know, I took lessons with him, so I knew him pretty well. So he didn't really have those attitudes quite as much, although he had his own, you know, outlook. But guys like John Hurt, Skip James, Son House, those guys that really, they were like fish out of water, I thought. But they were also enjoying the hell out of it, you know, because suddenly they were getting all this attention. And Doc Watson, you know, and Ralph was the guy to talk to about that stuff, because he brought all these people up.
Yeah, and we did to some degree. And I ask you a question that we touched on with him a little bit. Did you ever sense with them that they adapted to the urban audiences, that they changed their repertoire? And I'll tell you a story which illustrated it for me. I wonder if you saw any of this. I don't remember the name of the musician or if he was named, but it was a Delta blues guy who said, when I played at home for house parties or juke joints or what have you, for my friends and neighbors, I played electric guitar. People wanted to dance.
Sure.
And I couldn't play an electric guitar up north because it wasn't authentic enough, even though it was what I did when I was home.
That's right. Well, same with Doc Watson. He played electric guitar too before he came up north.
Did you sense these guys having to reach back to an authenticity that they might never have had, and who was giving it to them?
In some cases, yeah. I mean, somebody like John Lee Hooker, for instance, who always played electric, I'm sure, was playing acoustic when he played at Folk City. I'm not sure how much they could or were able to change their style or their repertoire. They probably played the same songs, but there was this judgmental thing about not playing through an amp, which was, you know, pretty crazy when you think about it.
Was that kind of
just
a
so
dividing
funny.
line?
Yeah.
Was electricity really the?
Oh yeah, for a while it really was, and I know that I was shocked the first time I heard that when Doc Watson was first discovered by Ralph. He was a fan of Chet Atkins and Merle Travis. He played electric.
Ralph told us that he was a rockabilly singer.
Yeah, he played rockabilly, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but when he came up north, it was all this old time, sort of back porch music.
You said you started singing in the late 60s, 67?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after
Yeah.
everybody bought it from everyone. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. What was, I get a sense of Irwin as somebody who was real dogmatic politically, real dogmatic musically. Is that accurate?
Mhm. Yeah. Irwin's a very, very smart guy. But he definitely had a very sectarian view of the world. And I think it came through in the magazine. Yeah, and especially in the 50s, it was absolutely, some of the things they wrote were abominable.
He didn't have a musical background, did he? He was pure
No,
politics.
pure politics, yeah. And I think a lot of Irwin and a lot of other communists saw folk music as a vehicle rather than, it wasn't an end in itself, but it was a means to political indoctrination or political, just putting forth a viewpoint or getting people involved in a political process that they might not have been involved in before. And it's obvious when you look at the pages of Sing Out, what they printed and the kind of editorials they had, the kind of judgments that they made about who was in and who wasn't in. And very often that had very little to do with talent, it had to do with the person's particularly political point of view.
Yeah, and Mr. David went all this commercialism.
Oh, yeah.
And that just.
Well, it was both, I think it was a combination. On the one hand, it was opening up the world to this ideology. On the other hand, it must have been somewhat threatening because it was democratizing it to a large extent,
Did you know Barbara Danwood?
Oh yeah, pretty well.
Yeah. She had a career that was really diametrically opposed to commercialism. It seems as though she really worked herself into politics. Did you ever have a chance to talk to her about that, or as people are running to a contract?
Yeah, well, of course, she's very political also, and has been for as long as I've known her. But her music was, very oriented towards the blues kind of thing, and I guess it was never as commercial as she would have liked. I think it's tough for a white woman to sing the blues and try to be authentic and make a living at it. Yeah.
When did you start Homespun?
I started Homespun when I moved up here in '67.
Okay, did you just get this idea? That's a
Yeah.
wonderful idea.
Yeah, I was writing books on how to play the guitar. I'd written several books and articles in Sing Out on how to play. And I had students because I had been teaching, and then I started seriously going on the road with my brother. And after the Children of Paradise split up, then we formed a duet, or actually we had a little band. But we went back to acoustic stuff. And just kind of to supplement, to keep the teaching thing going, I started making tapes for people. And then it just turned into this thing where it caught on and started getting requests for more stuff. And so my wife Jane started doing the business stuff at home, just running the tapes off and going to the mailbox, and just started like that.
Now it's video tapes?
Yeah, now it's mostly video,
Yeah,
yeah.
now the video for sure. The
Oh,
video
you get to
for
wash
sure.
people's fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good
Mhm.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of Woodstock.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I should show you I should
Yeah, we love to
give you a catalog. I'll find it on the way down.
What's your sense of, as we don't want to take too much of your time, but I want to, anybody who comes to your mind, somebody who you were doing what we were doing, who was not really famous, you adopted.
Somebody who you might have missed.
Yeah, exactly. I know you don't know.
Like you brought up Luke Faust. who's-
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Luke
an
could be-
interesting name and,
right.
and an interesting story, and maybe you can track it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, I'm sure you can track him down. Dave knows where he is.
Okay.
In fact, Dave is having a party in May for this retrospective album that he's doing, and he told me Luke was going to be there.
Wow.
So, and he's the one who told me that he moved back to Hoboken. So
Okay.
you could probably find him through Dave if nobody else. I'd have to think about that a little bit. Certainly Sam Hood.
Okay.
If
Yeah,
you're interested,
that's
what it depends on if that's within the period that you're
Very
talking
much
about.
so. I mean, we are looking, give you a little, we're looking at 57 to 66, say.
Okay, okay.
When it
Yeah.
started.
Sam Hood definitely
You
then.
know, and the historical context is going to be, we'll
Right.
talk about Woody and Pete in the 30s and 40s and what they were doing and how the
Mhm.
whole left folk music thing came to develop.
Right.
Yeah, that's the context, but the setting
Mm-hmm.
is definitely 58, 57 to 66 and thereabouts, sort of when the boom might have ended in electric music
Right,
became the
right.
thing. Yeah.
If there was anybody else that I'm
Those
forgetting.
are actually two good names, and that's what we.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
He's here.
Sam
I
Hood's
had his
here.
address.
Oh, okay. So we-
Yeah, I
Mhm.
just looked through my list of.
Mm-hmm. I have to think about it. If I may be able to come up with some things,
It's fine.
when I think
The
about
other
it.
thing is photos and footage that you haven't mentioned. We do George Freetown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Diana Davies has a lot of terrific photos. In fact, I have a whole pile of them. I can show you something because I have to give this back to her.
Okay.
But I can just, I'll bring this in.
Okay.
Great.